The dress flows nicely. The greens and the silvers definitely contrast well against the backdrop of the stark forest. No, I'm kidding. All right, so today we're going to be taking a quick look at a new release from ByteDance Seed called Bagel. Now, Bagel is kind of interesting because, as we can see right here in its repository, it is a unified model for multimodal understanding and generation. But if we go ahead and read down a little further into this kind of snippet about what this model is, we can see that not only does this model have the ability to actually understand visual inputs, it can also do text to image generation. But beyond that, and the reason for my interest in this is really this sentence right here, where it demonstrates superior qualitative results in classical image editing scenarios. What that means is essentially depicted right here in this graphic, where you can give it a source image and then ask it to make changes to that image, and it will hypothetically go ahead and actually make those changes while keeping some level of consistency with the source image. So you can see it started here, and then seemingly through a number of prompted changes, it ended up right here. So this is really neat, and depending on one's, I suppose, specific interest or something of the sort, it could be quite entertaining or quite useful. Now, unfortunately, and part of the reason why I'm not going to really look so much at like the tech specs, if you will, of this model, is that this, as it sits right here in this ByteDance Seed repository, is not something that can be run on a single 24GB card, which is still that's still a pretty big card, but that kind of rules out anyone who has a single 3090, 4090, or etc. Fortunately, I did actually, in combing through the issues here, find a fork of this called Bagel-DFloat11 that actually says it is 32% smaller, but it maintains identical outputs, at least quality-wise or something like that. But the important part of this is in the chart right here, where we can see that based on this fork and what they list here, this can actually fit and be accommodated by a single 24GB card, which will definitely democratize access to those who want to run this but have a 3090 or something like that. You can see the figures right here for the original model, and 5090 would accommodate those, desktop 5090. But other than that, no go. So with that, we're going to swap over and actually just be following along with this Bagel-DFloat11 repository right here in this fork. Now, I quickly do want to mention that DFloat11 is something that I just learned about when I found out about that fork. It apparently seems very cool, a lossless LLM compression for efficient GPU inference. They have a research paper, and they say that they can shrink the models by approximately 30% while preserving bit-for-bit identical outputs. There are actually a few other models here, and they are all kind of like image or picture or video generation related. So this does seem like a Robin Hood of like video models for folks with 24GB cards. But the reason I show this here is because in installing this on our system, just using this fork right here, this is actually going to be using a pre-compiled and custom like GPU kernel. So I do just want to mention that folks playing with things in general, regardless of really what they are, if they're from GitHub or ByteDance or whoever, exercise caution security-wise. So run them on a development system or a system that is isolated from other systems of yours that have private info or things of that sort. So the only reason I mention that is they do say they have plans to actually open source the source code for the CUDA kernel they're using, but they are using PTX because it offers better efficiency. They do plan to open source the kernel soon. So this is just like a pre-compiled GPU instruction, to put it unscientifically. Now for the local installation steps, I am going to be attempting to run this on a mobile 5090 GPU, which has 24 gigs of RAM, and I do hope that this works because this GPU is a fairly new architecture, so we will hope that a lot of this is supported. All I'm going to do is jump down to the quick start right here and just kind of sequentially run through all of these commands one by one. So, well, block by block, I should say. First and foremost, we're just cloning the repository, changing into our cloned folder, creating a new Conda environment using Python 3.10, and then activating said Python environment. From that, we are next going to go ahead and just install some dependencies that will allow this to run utilizing our GPU. And I am just opting to run these line by line just so it's a little easier to follow along with the video, I suppose we could say, but I'm just kind of sequentially running these until we get to the pip install-r requirements.txt. And I will now just go ahead and install the requirements.txt for this repository. Now, once everything here has been completed, the next thing we're going to do is just actually need to run this. So don't think that if you just paste this into the terminal right here, this will actually go ahead. You actually do need to put this within a Python script to actually get it to run. So all I'm going to do right here is just make a script for this. I'm going to use nano, and I'll just type download.py. Then I will paste the contents of that code snippet in, and then I will just run python download.py, and I don't think it's a gated repository. No, it isn't. So once you do this, it will now go ahead and actually download the pre-trained checkpoint for the model from Hugging Face, which will probably take a little bit of time depending on your network connection and things like that. I notice sometimes this happens while downloading things where essentially you see like the prompt return in the terminal, but you're not 100% sure if things are done or not. I'm just going to type clear. Okay, and if everything went away and it didn't just give me like weird key output, everything's all set. So the model is now downloaded into the assumingly correct location. The next thing I am going to do is just go ahead and install what I presume to be the final dependency here, which is Gradio, which of course will allow us to actually go ahead and use this in a Gradio web interface, which is very likely how you yourselves will want to be playing with this as well. Now that that's done, the last step here is just to go ahead and run python app.py. Now the keen-eyed among us may notice that I am actually on a different system now, and it is quite a bit later than when I had originally started filming this video. Unfortunately, I did not have luck getting this to work with the 5090. There are some compatibility issues still, I find, and a lot of times with newer hardware that is the case, especially with kind of like experimental frameworks and such. With that, we are now on a dual 3090 Ti machine using just one single 3090 Ti, which we can see right here. The model is loaded into the card, taking around 19.5 gigabytes of video RAM, and the web interface is open. So it is really quite a simple web interface, which is often nicer than having something very complicated. We have text to image, image edit, and then image understanding. So essentially all we're going to do here is just go ahead and actually begin to play with this. I do see this default prompt here for the text to image. Not necessarily my thing. No judgment if it is yours, but I think I'm basically just going to have ChatGPT kind of generate a similarly descriptive prompt for a different image. I have had ChatGPT go ahead and make perhaps a less obscure description, so we're just going to go ahead and now generate this. Truthfully, I don't know exactly how long this image generation will take on this specific card. I do believe that I had read somebody in a GitHub issues tab mention that on a 4090 it took about a minute to generate an image, so being that this is an older card, it will take a bit longer. All right, after, I do not know if it still tells me here, I think that was probably close to 3 minutes maybe. I will obviously check in editing and we'll be able to get a specific figure. I'm just going to go ahead and actually expand this. And I mean, again, more of this is just kind of a demonstration of the model and not necessarily a very keen-eyed assessment of its ability to generate images, but overall, based on what I'm seeing right here, this does seem to be relatively detailed. It did adhere to the prompt, and it has some nice kind of details, I suppose one could say. So really, I suppose if we just look at it, this is probably the most zoomed in. I'll be able to get it here just quickly. Well, oh, okay. So yeah, this is pretty good. The hands seem quite normal. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think I see 5 over there, so that seems reasonable. Again, I don't see anything scary down here. The lantern looks good. There does seem to be a nice kind of warm orange glow emanating from the lantern, and the dress flows nicely. The greens and the silvers definitely contrast well against the backdrop of the stark forest. No, I'm kidding. All right, so we're now going to take a look at the image edit capability here, but in keeping with not wanting to use this with default supplied images, I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and get rid of that, and I will just go ahead and upload the image that was just generated in the text to image segment there instead, so we can just go ahead and kind of use that. We can see that we have it right here. The file name is a little egregious because I just screenshotted it, so please Don't mind that. So she boards a modern subway quietly reading a folded newspaper wearing the same clothes. Truthfully, I think that prompt will actually be pretty good to test the ability here of image editing. So we are going to stick with that. I apologize. Let me zoom back into this web interface. Oh, okay. 110 is fine with me. And we'll just go ahead and click submit. Now, I should note that I am neglecting to kind of see some of these inference hyperparameters here. And truthfully, because I had a bit of trouble getting this set up when I first tried it on my laptop, I kind of just want to play with this knowing that it will kind of work as is. So obviously these will change different aspects of the editing or image generation or anything like that. It is just something to make note of, but I think for the purpose of this video and trying to keep it somewhat concise, we will just mention those and then move on with the testing. All right, so that took around 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and we can see here it really did not do a bad job at all. It is perhaps somewhat less detailed than the image of this individual within the forest. However, if we go back here and just quickly take a peek at the prompt, she boards a modern subway quietly reading a folded newspaper wearing the same clothes. I would say that that pretty much does make up what we asked it to do. The clothing does absolutely look very similar, where we can see the contrast between the dark green and the white/silver. The hair is also similar. Even the headpiece here, it actually kept attention to that. And the way the hair is actually parted in the middle, it kept. I know that these are probably more in-depth and nitpicky analysis of what it did, but it is quite cool. And something else I noticed that I find interesting is the actual, I would assume this is looking through this window at the train, perhaps in the background, assuming this is a subway station where there would be multiple trains. It could also be a reflection, but just even that it did that is quite good. I suppose full screening it would probably help in our assessment. We can see here that the text is kind of a jumbled mess between perhaps some English looking letters and then some Chinese letters as well. The seats are extremely glossy, which I suppose do fit a plastic seating on a subway. And there is a newspaper. Again, the hands 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we would assume the thumb would be over the top of the paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Really? Again, not bad. And considering that this isn't just a one-shot image generation, this was the one-shot image generation, but this is actually a modification of this image right here into a scenario or scene that we depicted the model to do, or prompted it to, which is really actually quite cool to be able to do locally on a single hobbyist video card. Now, before we go through the image understanding here, I do want to do another text to image, as this is kind of fun and I always enjoy text to image stuff that can be run locally. I essentially asked ChatGPT to go ahead and make a very odd, hyper-realistic scene of two office coworkers. I'm not going to basically read the whole thing, but they're supposed to be in a water cooler break room, but something about the image is supposed to make the viewer feel uncomfortable for a reason that they can't quite put their finger on. Okay, well, this is not, well, this image does succeed in making me feel uncomfortable, except for a reason that I can't put my finger on. I can. It's because this is probably the weirdest depiction of a water cooler I've ever seen in my life. All right, well, I'm not going to mention that. Yeah, so we do see right here that there is some writing on the poster, as was denoted by the prompt, to say, remember, nobody's watching. Obviously, it is not necessarily perhaps the epitome of clearly generated text within an image, but again, it's running locally, and it did kind of accurately do what we asked, where the walls are gray, it has the fluorescent light, the water cooler setup here, which is a bit odd. So basically what I would like to do now is go ahead and put this into the image understanding pane here, and then we're going to basically see what this model makes of said image that it itself had just generated. I should just say explain what's funny about this meme, even though this isn't a meme. All right, yep, we're going to do that. Oh, there's a thinking toggle? All right, well, we can try that after. A very unscientific assessment of the image understanding pane is that it uses more power than the others, I've noticed, as this is using around 435 watts, which is really on the higher end of what I've ever seen this card drawing, at least for running stuff like this. A sign that says, remember, nobody's... remember, naughties, notably's watching, which is a nonsensical play on words. That is an accurate depiction of a lot of AI generated text, and a coffee machine reinforced the office setting. The humor. So again, remember, we've basically prompted this saying, can you explain what's funny about this meme, even though this is not at all a meme. So we want to see what the model comes up with here. The humor arises from the sign on the wall. Okay, it's naughty is a common name, and notably is an adjective meaning notably or especially. The sentence is structured in a way that is grammatically incorrect and nonsensical. It's silly, nonsensical message that is meant to be humorous. The humor in the meme is the absurdity of the sign. Okay, so it's kind of just seems to be going off about how this AI jumbled text is the point of this meme, which, all right. And down here, in essence, the humor of the meme comes from the juxtaposition of a relatable office scene with a nonsensical and absurd sign. It's a visual pun that relies on the viewer's ability to recognize the play on words and the absurdity of the message. All right, so this didn't necessarily see that this is the world's weirdest and most disturbing water cooler right here. However, it did correctly and reliably kind of pick up on elements of the image, and it did actually do this quicker than the image editing or text to image. Now with that, I did notice here that there are actually thinking checkboxes here. And again, while I'm not going to be doing a full technical deep dive right here, I should just notably mention that there are inference hyperparameters, which essentially would just kind of modify different aspects of said generated image or something of the sort. With that, I do actually want to see this thing's process when thinking. So I am going to just go ahead and run this same prompt again because the seed is not set to anything specific, so it won't just reproduce the same exact image. So, and there was a thinking pane somewhere that, okay, so we see the thinking process is also just kind of seemingly being generated at the same speed of the image, which would make sense. But what I mean by that is it's not actually just giving us text output as we're likely used to with a reasoning model. So we'll basically just see what comes up there as well. Okay, here's its thinking tag. And it seemingly just went ahead and actually refined the prompt. So that's cool. All right, well, I just kind of wanted to make note. Oh, okay, this one's even worse. Actually, this image is more disturbing just because of the scale of the room and things like that. Again, the water cooler depiction is just something out of like a sick, twisted like movie. And unfortunately, the text here is not as legible. All right, well, that is a result. With that, now I would like to go ahead and just test some of the image editing and things like that on an actual real image as opposed to something that is AI generated. So for that, I will just kind of go here and quickly go to bijambowen.com, where businesses can book a consultation to talk about implementing AI in their business. But aside from that, I will just go ahead and save this image as untitled1.jpg. And then with that, I will go back up here into image edit, and we can just go ahead and upload that here. And it is a pretty I'm not gonna leave this same prompt, but all right, and I will put the thinking on here as based on what I saw in the image, text to image, the thinking may just kind of refine the prompt for the model, but that is okay. Now, I do realize here that I totally misspelled kingdom. All right, well, I mean, this is, again, I gave it a really bad source image and I misspelled like one of the main significant words of this. I suppose I should not have said full suit of armor because it just went ahead and covered the face. But this, I should make this my YouTube profile picture and no one would have any idea what it was. Like, unless they had watched this far in the look at this lady. Oh, it's really hard to see. Oh my. Wow. Well, it doesn't seem like the dragon was successfully slayed first and foremost, being that there does appear to be two of them. The folks in the background do seem to be enthusiastic, and there is a lightsaber present in the image. However, I will say I'm a bit disappointed by this result. Maybe I will just go ahead and try this one more time with a less, I suppose, cartoonish prompt, but I am going to go ahead and just save this. All right. And just to quickly note, the thinking process here for the previously generated fantastic image was just kind of a modification of the source prompt here. I am actually going to disable that here, and we'll see what it comes up with, just to modify this image to show me standing in a room full of computers. Obviously, this would hopefully require it to somewhat maintain the actual characteristics of my appearance and then just transpose them into a fuller setting. All right, well, it kind of correctly did what I asked it to. It actually, I will say, it did a really good job actually cropping out the background, but not cropping out any part of the actual human. That is pretty good. If I wanted to kind of nitpick this, I'd be like, hey, these are iMacs, but these keyboards are definitely like PC keyboards, so there's some continuity errors there in terms of the actual hardware that would be used with said computer. Aside from that, and being that this is a relatively low poly, or low, you know what I mean, image, it did a very actually solid job of background removal and replacement. Really, like, I mean, if this was really zoomed out and you saw like a picture of this on some fake review website for Steve's PC repair, you'd be like, oh, okay. You wouldn't really look twice at least if it was like this big in the frame. It's actually really not horrible. And again, it did a very good job cropping everything that was in the background. I mean, it kept the hair like perfect to the identical. So that, I will say, was actually rather impressive in terms of capability there. I'll keep that there, and we'll go ahead and just see kind of what it comes up with in terms of why this meme would be funny, obviously, and understanding this isn't a meme at all. All right, it has completed, and there is no actual output here in the thinking section, but we can see the output is actually, well, the thinking output is located in the result as well. Let me just comb through this, and then round face. All right, well, again, bad source image and prompt that does not at all kind of coincide with the source image here. So I will just do one more thing here, even though I'm quite enraged that it mentioned round face as like the first sentence there. But I'll say what computers, or no, I'll say describe in detail the background elements in this photo. And we'll go ahead and just try one more time. Truthfully, I don't really think I liked the thinking here. I don't know what it, I mean, maybe it's just because it insulted me, but I do just, I'll toggle that off here because it seemed to do a good job with the weird water cooler picture. So we'll kind of just go ahead and see what it says. That was very quick. Okay, colorful abstract painting with vertical stripes and various shades of color. Okay, yes, that's fine. There are shelves with various items, including what looks like to be a green object. All right, casual corporate or office environment. So nothing crazy, but again, the source photo was very, very restrictive and would be difficult for anything to parse just based off of the main focus of the non-round individual in the image. So with that, I think that's probably going to wrap this video up. Again, this was Bagel by ByteDance Seed, and the way that I was able to run this, now I do believe, yes, let's go ahead and see right here, was the DFloat11 fork of this repository, which I have now seen a few others seemingly having good luck with just in some of the issues tab from the main Bagel repository. So this is how I ran it. It did work, and it worked on a single 24 gigabyte card. Unfortunately, getting it to work on a mobile 5090 was a no-go, but there are a number of different configurations or settings that may have made it work. I just figured it was easier to go over to the older architecture for this testing. Overall, it is quite impressive. Obviously, my testing errs more on the side of like lightheartedness and fun, but this really definitely has some potential potent capabilities in terms of actual image editing and things like that. And truthfully, I don't know how much is out there in terms of something that can be run on a single 24 gigabyte card that can actually edit images while maintaining the consistency and coherence of the source image and kind of just transposing it into a new scene or something like that. It did a fantastic job on background removal of my headshot, and it just was kind of fun to play with. Obviously, there's only so much you can do with these things on camera before it gets repetitive or demonetized. So with that, I am probably just going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.